at the Great Blacks and Wax Mansion. And this is Teens Are Talking, and this is a special edition for Teens Are Talking. It's called a Teen Forum, where our younger generation asks generations ahead of them, compare and contrast on how they can help them be the future. Join us. Hi, I'm SHAWNTE Campbell, and here with me today are two teens, Nia Braid and Davon Williams. They will be representing our teen audience by asking our podium some questions today.
Oh, hi, I'm Nia Braid. I'm a junior at Baltimore City College High School, and I'm here to represent the teens in a positive way.
My name is Davon Williams. I'm a senior at Loyola Blakefield, and I'm here to do the same thing as Nia.
So you guys ready to nail them tonight?
Oh yeah, we have a lot of good questions in store for them. I hope they're ready.
We're going to confuse them. We're going to leave them blank-faced. They're going to give us the fish look. We got them.
And plus, we're here to represent the teens. So we're here to say what a lot of teens have on their mind. A lot of questions that we don't get answered in school. So this is a great way to get it answered.
And our first person to speak is going to be Nia Braid.
Okay, thank you. Okay, my first question is for Mrs. Judge Johnson. I would like to know your standpoint on the death penalty. I would like to know your standpoint on the death penalty. How do you feel about it?
I don't think it is appropriate. It does not deter criminal conduct, and it's disproportionately used against people of color, especially if people of color happen to commit a crime against a white person. It's unfair in its application, and in theory, I just don't think it does any good, and we should find a better way in which to try and deter crime.
Thank you. And Mr. Pettit, my question for you is, how do you feel about music artists being held responsible for crimes that teenagers commit when the teenagers say it was based on the music they heard, and it's usually with rape music, primarily black artists? How do you feel about that?
It's an interesting question. I have to deplore some of the lyrics that I hear in music. I think there's a lack of social consciousness in terms of the artists understanding the impact that they have on our young people. And I think that has been one of the elements that has led to sort of a self-destruction in terms of the violence, gangs, guns, as I already mentioned. Whether or not they bear, I guess we can conclude that they bear a social responsibility, if not a legal responsibility, for things that take place as a subsequent or natural reaction to those type of lyrics and things which stimulate violence. So I do think that there is a definite connection. I think it is a cultural connection, but I think just like the dress and the manifestations of other things that we see negative, I think that those artists do in fact set forth negatives to our young people where they can do so much more in terms of being role models for the positive. For example, I forget the artist right now, but the person in the music industry, I'm sure somebody at the table can remind me, but there's the new concept, vote or die, for this election. I mean, I think that's so political and so timely in terms of the positive things that these people can do who are so adored by our young folks. And these T-shirts, vote or die, I think in terms of the upcoming election is right on time because it's so symbolic as to what this upcoming presidential election represents. So they can play a very positive role. The direct answer to your question is I'm very disappointed that they have not at this juncture.
Okay, and I have one last comment to make, and I would like for anyone to pose their 2 cents or their comments. And In school, we sometimes talk about the corrupt legal system that we have. And I remember one time one of my African American teachers had brought up the fact that when guns and drugs are entered into our country, they enter through the government. The government brings guns, the government's bringing drugs into our country, and drug dealers sell them. The drug dealers are arrested and put into the legal system, and the money is given right back to the government. So it's just a corrupt circle going round and round again. But it all starts with the government, and I just want to know what you think about that.
Well, I would not agree with you that the government does that. I would state rather that the government tolerates that. Basically, in the drug trade, you have 4 levels. At the bottom level is the person you see on the corner selling drugs. He is a youngster and probably an addict. He sells a $10 cap of cocaine, and from that, he can keep 3. He can either use one of the caps, give and pay the rest of the money to the person sitting back at the stash house. And the person sitting back at the stash house is level number 2. And he's never arrested because he's in the stash house. It's only the little fellow on the street who's taking all of the risk of going to jail, all of the risk of being shot by a competitor, and all of the danger therein, all of the risk. The person at the stash house, the number 2, takes no risk. And then these 2 are usually black at the bottom level, the person on the street, the person at the stash house. And up above him is the person who is the wholesaler. He's usually white. He absolutely takes no risk, and the money goes up to him, the great majority. And above him is the importer. He's usually white, and he gets his cut, and he takes no risk. And our legal system is geared to catch the little man on the corner. And that's what it does, and that accounts for why we have such disproportionate number of people of color in our jail system, because the enforcement, the criminal justice system, starting with the police, the courts, and the higher ups, are not concerned with going up the chain to get the real drug dealer, that is, these 2 up, the wholesaler and the importer, who are white. It seeks out the person on the corner who's black. So, to that extent, to the extent that the government tolerates that, then the government is guilty of the same conspiracy as white America generally is in oppressing people of color.
We want to show a great appreciation for these special people that are in our community coming out and helping our children. It's a great honor. Thank you.
And my next question is for Mr. Dwight. I want to know how you feel about people who say they don't want to go out and vote because they don't want to do jury duties and have another person's life on their hands, even though they still use the license. A lot of people don't know that. So what would you say to them?
Well, I would say that it's an absolute necessity that we vote and that we tolerate whatever the system requires us to do to be eligible. So I think that's inexcusable when you consider the blood that has been shed for the opportunity to vote. I don't think we have any rational basis, whether it's exposure to jury duty, whether it's having to register as a voter, as a on the motor vehicle rolls. I think that it's an imperative that we understand that this is an absolute prerequisite and necessity for survival is the right to vote, and we need to educate our people and to push in any way we can to make sure that people exercise this right that is so fundamental to freedom and our progress in this nation. But let me just back up 1 second, if I may. On your last question to Judge Johnson, I guess I'm a little bit more conspiratorial and direct than the good judge. I do believe that if you examine the history of this nation, that there is some aggressive input by our national government that has led to the creation of this problem. You got to remember, this came out very, very deeply in the Contra investigations. it was admitted that CIA was in fact bringing narcotics. And that was just, in my opinion, it was just the scratch off the surface. They talked about Los Angeles, but they didn't talk about what was being done across this nation in terms of narcotics being brought in to, in that case, fuel an illegal war. But I even go more so, and Judge Johnson and I have talked about this, but I believe very strongly that when the riots took place in the 60s and the discontent into the 70s, that there was a strong think tank movement in this government as to what to do about the black problem. The black problem was that we as a people had the holes on the urban environment in this nation, and that was a strangulation hole because that was the very economics of this nation. So I believe it is not by accident that we then begin to see the infusion of narcotics into our neighborhoods. We begin to see certain laws being changed, for example, mandatory sentencing. We saw laws that were created which led to a disparity in sentencing, where a young black kid who might have one type of CDS would get a mandatory sentence of 10 years if he had crack, where the same amount of CDS, or when I say CDS, controlled dangerous substance, would allow for probation in the white areas. The sentencing guidelines which Congress passed. The omnibus crime bill, which came under the Clinton administration. I believe that these were all derivatives of a very conservative nation that decided that the best way to, in fact, solve the black problem was to, in fact, not only input the drugs and so forth, which would lead to internal decay of the system of the society in terms of African Americans and urban Americans, but also, and this went further, it went to all people of color, went to disadvantaged people, but this also led to the high degree of incarceration, led to the high degree of deaths. And then when you have the infusion of AIDS that came into our communities, but these two things, that dissolved what was considered the black problem. And so in 40 years or 35 years, what was considered by this system as something that had to be dealt with in terms of potential future riots or organized protests or disobedience or civil rights was resolved. And this is how it's been resolved, in my opinion.
Well, may I just comment here? Her question was, how the drugs get here, was the government bringing them here? I don't believe that the government directly brought them here. I think they turned a blind eye while they come here, of course. But what Dwight was saying so far as how the control of black people with the mandatory sentencing, of course that's true. That was aimed at black people, as he indicated. If you have crack, then you get a much higher penalty than if you had powder cocaine, because it was thought that blacks used crack more. And they wanted to demonize the black community so they would be powerless. And how they did that is by arresting this little #1 man on the corner, parading him on the evening news every night, showing black crime, so it made white America and some black Americans think that the drug problem was a black problem, when just the opposite is closer to the truth. It's a white problem because they are responsible for importing it in, wholesaling, and making the money off it, and enslaving the blacks through the use. And they treat a black user, if black use drugs, is a criminal problem. If whites use drugs, it's a medical problem. So you have that disparity, and the government certainly is behind that, no question. I just disagree on how it got here and whether the government was actively involved in that. I just can't believe that they were. I think they turned a blind eye and permitted it. There are still evils in our society. We have racism, sex.